Nobody said it would be easy. Nobody said that it would all be fine. But to get where we're going, brother, you gotta hold the line. It ain't a matter of if, no, it's just a matter of time. But to get where we're going.
Hello lovelies and unlovelies. Today we're going to be taking a look at Exodus. What the hell is Exodus? Exodus is a forthcoming computer game by Archetype Entertainment. Archetype Entertainment is a computer games division of Wizards of the Coast, which has somehow not been cut. Exodus is also a shared universe with a forthcoming series of novels. I think the first one's out, which is a prequel, by Peter F. Hamilton. You probably haven't heard of this until it popped up abruptly on Wizards of the Coast's site. I didn't know anything about it either, which is really one of only two reasons that I bothered to buy this. Let's get into it, but flipping through is going to be quite quick because there's two huge volumes to go through here. So, yes, it is all of those things. Now, I also like and play computer games, though they're more Mrs. Grimm's speciality. Fairly obviously to anyone who's been paying attention, I'm a tabletop RPG fanatic. I'm also a big fan of Peter F. Hamilton's work, despite him being a filthy conservative, particularly the Night's Dawn series. So why hadn't I heard of this? Why hadn't anybody else I know in the RPG space, or even wider, heard of this? Why had my fellow Peter F. Hamilton fans been talking about this? Why haven't I seen anything about it in any of the recent video game and tech shows and so on? It all seems a bit weird, but it seems that the first we really heard about this was when the TTRPG dropped on the Wizards site, and apparently the first prequel novel, as I said, is out already. I mean, this should be significant, this should draw attention. This is Wizards of the Coast doing something that isn't Dungeons and Dragons and advertising and selling it on their main site, right? Previously, they've kind of farmed out Hasbro properties to other companies to do things like G.I. Joe, Transformers, all of that stuff. But here Wizards are doing something. It's not D&D, a sci-fi game, a whole transmedia franchise across novels, computer games, and a TTRPG. And none of us have heard of it. Yeah, transmedia, there's a term you probably haven't heard since the early 2000s. They're finally catching up to the early 2000s, I guess, and the amazing and storied success of Gareth Michael Skarka, who was obsessed with transmedia back then. So, yeah, I made a foolish decision prior to needing to spend all my money helping my friend out, and bought a copy because I was curious, and curiosity killed the cat and my wallet, apparently. I had to know what was going on. So, what is Exodus? Uncharitably, I would say what you have here is you take the most unpopular installment from the Mass Effect franchise. A lot of ex-BioWare people in that are involved in Archetype. Make it just a little teensy bit more hard sciencey by having space travel all be down to time dilation. And that's basically what you've got here. They also stole one of my big ideas for one of my settings, the bastards, but I had been sitting on it for decades, so I guess it's not that surprising that someone else would come along and nick it. A sci-fi setting where there aren't any aliens, though there might be, but we'll see, I expect. But rather, what there is a hugely diversified and genetically engineered form of humanity, adapted to many different worlds and systems and roles and so on. And that's the idea that they have wholesale stolen, so I guess I won't be doing that anytime soon. But here's the kind of compressed Cliff Notes version of the story. Earth is fucked, was fucked. Fuckery has occurred, rendered largely uninhabitable. Humanity, or in all likelihood a very small portion of humanity, builds enormous arc ships and flees to the stars, looking for new places to settle, using a new drive that they've developed, which allows you to travel at something close to the speed of light by sucking energy away from dark matter and so on. Apparently, I don't know, hand-wavium, but at least there's time dilation, so you get your sort of hard science side to things a little bit there, which I'm happy to see, to be honest. Anyway, humanity diversifies into the stars, looking for some place to settle. Eventually, some colony ships arrive in the Centauri cluster, which is about 15,000 light years away, and they find several green worlds. So they send out a signal to other colony ships, which start receiving the signal and start turning up in the Centauri cluster in waves. But by the time some of these ships, that again move at a sizable chunk of the speed of light, relativistic velocity, by the time they arrive, the humanity that first found and colonized the cluster has become something very different, or a collection of very different things. There's a group called the Elohim, who may be the first colonists, or some elder race, might be aliens, who knows, they might just be very advanced, early arriving humans. That seems to be one of the big mysteries of the setting. I'm not saying it's aliens, but... Then there's the Celestials, who are the more advanced subspecies of human. There's a few major Celestials, but there's plenty of room for others if you wanted to introduce others into your campaign. Celestials are hyper-engineered strains of humanity, massively technological in various different ways, and otherwise, well advanced from any recognizable form of humanity. So they're sort of transhuman species on their way to transcendence, probably, maybe, or destruction, who knows. The various celestial species also created things called changelings, and these are sort of halfway between old-fashioned Earthicans and celestials. They are genetically engineered humans as slave races and tools and soldiers and all the rest of it, and many of them have not been treated particularly well. It put me in mind of Dougal Dixon's book Man After Man, which was a sequel to Life After Man, in some of the ideas, like humans engineered for zero-G, and not just humans either, other animals from Earth stock as well. And then there's the players, the Johnny-come-latelys, the 23rd century version of wild humanity, fresh off the colony boat, freshly decanted out of their cryogenic container, or descended from the crew who stayed awake during the journey, and they're part, maybe, perhaps, of the latest wave of colony ships arriving, being settled on new planets, and building settlements, and finding their way in the cluster, and even the wilder galaxy. The wild humans off the colony ships have their own cultures that have either emerged during transit, or based upon the cultures that they came from. They have a 23rd century mindset, so they're recognizable to our 21st century way of thinking, so they're kind of like an in that we would somewhat recognize. But they have a severe technological, biological, and cultural deficit compared to the Celestials. So they're upstarts, constantly trying to play catch-up, and that means chasing down the technology of both the current Celestials and past Celestials that have transcended or wiped themselves out. 15,000 years minimum is a very long time for many civilizations to rise and fall and leave relics and empty cities and mind-bending technology and all of that other stuff there. So what makes it interesting to me is that this is all strains of humanity that has done this, and it's just the sheer scale of the universe that makes... And the deep time that creates that makes this so interesting and allows for settled and even ancient cultures, but all stemming from something that we can have some sort of intellectual relationship with. Now, players are what are called travelers. Hopefully there was no lawsuit or anything over that. I think someone mentioned there might have been, but yes, I think it's too generic a term. Anyway, travelers are what you are as a character. Travelers come from dynasties, which are more like big extended guilds, really, of adventurers, for want of a better term. They travel around the cluster, advancing the cause of their homeworlds, their people, and their dynasty, recovering technology, decoding technology, incorporating it into themselves, making it accessible to the people of their homeworld, dealing with various threats, often threats that they've caused to emerge in the first place, and so on and so forth. And, well, you know, it's the basis for an adventure game, so you know the kind of thing that's going to be coming there. Your character is human. Most of the biology that you run into out there in the cluster will be descended from humans or other Earth species, or engineered from humans or other Earth species. Which, again, as I say, makes things interesting in a way, but I can see how some people might be disappointed that none of the aliens are actually aliens. They're just alien to us. So that's a lot of the stuff about the background, not everything by any means. And I'm mostly talking here about the background because the rules will be shockingly familiar to everybody. So your character is human, close to baseline human. You have an origin which you pick from, which is more to do with your career and operates like species in other games or older school D&D. So instead of being an elf, a dwarf, a halfling, it's your career that determines your stat, well, your origin that determines your stat bonus and everything else, right? Being human doesn't really mean much. So you can be an archaeologist, a criminal, a detective, a grifter, a hotshot, an inventor, a soldier, or a spy. And doubtless there will be other options as well. You have levels, and that's called Constellation, which is rather neatly a sort of living tattoo that tracks how experienced you are, how many worlds you've explored, stars you've visited, and so on. So it's a living tattoo that you can reveal to others to sort of gamify and bring into the lore of the world why you might talk about someone's level or whatever when you're talking about their constellation. As that's okay as an idea, I guess. Then you've got classes. Well, all travelers, it seems, are special in some way. Not in the sense that they get to ride the short spaceship, though compared to the Celestials it probably is the short spaceship, but rather that they somehow, as wild humans, have the capacity to unlock certain capabilities and to interact with certain precursor Celestial artifacts and technology in a way that most normal humans can't. So quite how you're supposed to sort of generate non-special humans, I'm not sure. I guess you just treat them as baddies and monsters, but doubtless this stuff will open up if the game is a success, but I'm not betting on it given the lack of fanfare of its original launch and the sort of general market lack of awareness of this game or the computer game or the novel series. So yeah, your classes are various types of special. You can be autistic, ADHD, no, not really. You can be a cataphract. Cataphracts pilot unique customized mech suits because they have the special ability to interface with that technology better. So they make for a superior sort of tank role and damage dealers. Someone's been taking their cues from BattleTech because managing heat in your cataphract is a big issue that you need to pay attention to. So they're more used in short bursts rather than being a sort of always on piece of equipment, I think. There are daemons who become bonded with mysterious silicate beings that may or may not be AI, but probably aren't because they seem to regard in this setting general AI as being a hard problem that can't be solved, much like faster than light travel. So you bond with these silicate beings in a sort of venom-like symbiosis. Prodigies have a more general capability to employ and understand celestial technology, and remnants. Remnants is what they kind of call the leftovers, the archaeological technology. What I would call exotech in Machinations of the Space Princess, for example. But they're supposed to be able to use this stuff in a way that is beyond the capacity of your baseline humans. And then you have rangers, who kind of make the least sense given the background. A ranger is someone who is good at long-range combat and who has an awakened companion. So, the idea of uplifted species has very much been taken on here, and rangers have these intelligent, animalistic companions, which, in all honesty, would make good characters themselves in a lot of ways. It would be quite fun to have a group in which one person plays the ranger and another person plays an uplifted, cybernetically enhanced dolphin or orca or octopus, or they even have giant ravens that may even be able to pick you up and fly with you depending on the gravity of the location that you find yourselves at. So, you can live out your Tarnsman fantasies on the back of a raven if you really wanted to. But they seem to make the least sense because the uplifted creatures already exist, are already able to communicate. They stem from the 23rd century technology and the uplift of all these species. And so where is the specialness of the ranger? It seems less well defined and less obvious than it is for the other characters. Your character also gets defined to an extent in sort of roleplay terms by what they leave behind to take up travelling, some kind of anchor or hook you have to a particular world or a particular civilization or whatever else. Like, maybe you have a child, right, and you go gallivanting off around the stars for a week and come back only to find out that they've aged like 10 years during your absence, right? And that's poignant, and if you want extreme versions of that, you can read The Forever War, I guess. Maybe it's a family you have a link to, so the family goes on and you're this weird uncle that turns up every 100 years or so with presents and wants to catch up on what everyone's been up to. Maybe it's a mentor or a fellow traveller, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, people, places and things that you're connected to. Like, maybe there's a small tree on a habitat that you come back to, and each time you come back it's bigger and bigger and older, and so it goes. And you're also defined organisationally by allegiance to a traveller dynasty. They have several of them already. There's not really any rules for making up your own, but it wouldn't be difficult, and I suspect that's coming. The character classes also have subclasses. I think I'm right in saying there's 2 subclasses for each of them, apart from the ranger, which I didn't see any subclasses for, but I may be going blind. And that's obviously going to be room for expansion in much the same way as it is in a lot of D&D supplementary material. All the subclasses, it's kind of like how the old prestige classes used to be, but a bit more integrated, I suppose. And like I said, I haven't really said much about the rules because it's pretty much exactly 5th edition D&D. The whole game feels like, in parts, a bit of an answer to Starfinder, but less hand-wavy space magic than you might expect from something that's kind of an answer to Starfinder. The advantage of using the 5th edition D&D rules is that you know what you're getting into and you don't have that much to learn that's new, and that's probably what they're banking on. But the disadvantage is that 5th edition D&D is manifestly unsuited to this sort of game. In a way that Starfinder isn't, because Starfinder is much more fantastical, right? It's regular Pathfinder in space. This isn't D&D in space. That would be Spelljammer or Dragonstar if you want to go back to some 3rd edition, third-party stuff. It's not even D&D in space in the way that, say, D20 Modern or D20 Future were back in the day. There's a lot of information in these 2 books. Each one is about 300 pages. One's an encyclopedia, which is more of a sort of combined tech, species, background, bestiary, everything together sort of thing. I think taking in the information will probably be easier if it's done in a structured way, such as by reading the novels or playing the computer game. I worry that I've already kind of overwhelmed you with detail about the background and so on. But the whole thing is somewhat more plausible and less hand-wavy as a future for transhumanity and human diversity in ways that are sometimes surprising. I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't want to give away too much. But there is this fundamental paradox at the heart of this game in that I really like the ideas that are presented. Obviously, because I was developing a similar idea for a couple of decades without ever getting around to it. Many of the ideas presented in the game, presumably in the novels, are very Hamiltonian. Companion animals or even starships, right? You can look back through a lot of Hamilton's work and there is a lot of that sort of thing. The companion animals, the organic mass intelligences, human divergence, organic technology as much as hard metallic technology. Genetically engineered subspecies of humans go all the way back to his Mindstar series, where there were genetically engineered and enhanced humans who were soldiers for aquatic warfare, things like that. I like Hamilton's work, and so I like those ideas, and that's all fantastic. I'm not going to finish flipping through, so that tells you how much material you're going to be getting. So, scores then. Style-wise, and this may surprise you, I'm going to be giving it a 3. Now, there are some pieces that are more standout, that are more effective, and those would be 4 or even 5 if the artwork was consistent. There is a lot of stuff in here that seems to be renders from the game. I would expect that if a game is being developed that there would be a lot of concept art in more traditional media, which to my taste, and obviously this is to an extent a matter of taste, would have been better to include here. There's also the Curse of Wizards is present in quite a bit of the artwork as well, in that it is kind of mushy and pastel, doesn't have a sense of urgency or action or kinetic movement to it. These are all problems that plague Wizards of the Coast art and have done for a very long time at this point. That's disappointing. And a lot of it looks like the kind of mushy AI, even when it isn't AI. And in fact, in those instances, I probably would have preferred it if they had used AI, because you can prompt AI to get better work than some of the stuff that's presented. But again, there are a lot of good pieces. There's a lot of what seems to be CG renders from the game, which it seems churlish to complain about. But there's also a lot of bad, mushy stuff. The presentation is okay, but nothing to write home about, and lacks spirit is the way I guess I'd put it. There's a lot of stuff with objectively sketchier, worse art that nonetheless has a certain spirit and emphasis to it that is exciting on the page. Mostly, this isn't that, unfortunately. I expect better, both from software studios with a lot of money to throw around, and from the industry leader in TTRPGs. So I'm a little harsher on them than I would be on other companies and other people. But still, style-wise, middling to high 3, but still a 3. In terms of substance, there is an enormous amount here, possibly too much. And the way in which it brings you into the world is not particularly well thought out, which is why I think it is probably a good idea to read the prequel novel or to play the computer game. Something that is, at least to start with, a bit more linear and will ease you into it to an extent. I hope. I would expect, rather than this. So while there is a lot here, and it wasn't really that expensive, considering, the size of these two big, chunky hardbacks, even so, the usability is not necessarily fantastic. The encyclopedia is a bit mixed up, so not necessarily particularly great for reference. 4. So, style 3, substance 4, 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. If you're a Hamilton fan, if you think science fiction can be done successfully using unmodified 5th edition D&D, then maybe this is for you. I don't regret buying it, but mostly for the world building. Though I do regret being made aware of it, since they stole my ideas, the bastards. No, they wouldn't have been aware of them. It's just convergent thinking. Parallel evolution, you might say. But there you go. I will just sit here wittering on while I flip through the last few pages of the second book, because this has been a lot to flip through. This is me making noise. La la la, do do do, dee dee dee. There's some essays here about the technology, blah blah blah. Some nice, interesting landscapes that nonetheless are a bit dull. I really think they could have done with some more action-based artwork, which seems to be making a bit of a comeback in other games, or a stronger graphical style, which has actually been present in other more modern Wizard stuff, which is encouraging, I suppose. But yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a thing that happened. I'm not sure they're going to succeed if they don't learn how to market better. Zang. I'm now porn adjacent. I run a tabletop game stream regularly with some porn stars, which you can check out with suitable precautions in place at tabletopless.org. And just know that I put as much effort into this campaign as I would any other tits or no tits.
The priest he says we're wicked, but to worship the devil's bird. But we respect the old ways, and we disregard his word. For we know they rest uneasy as we slumber in the night, and we'll always leave out a little bit of meat for the bird that's black and white. One's for sorrow, two's for joy.